Come close now, children. Come sit where the night air still carries the weight of old sorrows, where the cotton fields remember every drop of blood they drank, where the earth itself keeps secrets the history books won't tell. This old voice, cracked like dried clay in the Mississippi sun, got a story that ain't never died. It just been waiting for ears ready to hear. They called her Delia. Born in the quarters, raised in chains, used like she was nothing more than livestock. But Lord have mercy, what they didn't know was this: some souls can't be broken, only sharpened. Some rage don't holler, it waits. And some revenge comes quiet, on a china plate, sweet as sugar frosting. This here's the tale of how one woman's pain became a whole family's judgment day. How the Whitlock plantation, proud and white as bleached bone, fell to poison mixed with purpose. How birthday cake became funeral supper for generations that never got born. Now listen here, folk. This story starts long before Delia drew her first breath. Starts in the belly of a slave ship crossing that terrible Middle Passage, where her grandmother's screams got swallowed by the Atlantic. That's where we begin. Because to understand the poison, you gotta taste the pain that made it. The Charleston port in the year of our Lord 1802 stank of death dressed up as commerce. Salt air mixed with human waste, with fear sweat, with the copper smell of fresh whip marks on black flesh. The auction block stood in the center of the dock like an altar to Satan himself, and the white men gathered round it like Sunday congregation. But the god they worshipped was profit, pure and simple. The ship that morning carried its cargo of souls from the Gold Coast. When they opened the hold, the smell hit the dock so hard, even the white folk stepped back, covering their noses with handkerchiefs. But not for long. Money don't smell, they say, and these merchants had iron in their spines where mercy should have been. Among them, chained bodies stumbling into the burning Carolina sun, was a woman the slavers had marked down as Iodel in their ledger, though that sacred name would soon be stripped away like everything else. She was maybe 20 summers old, skin dark as fertile earth, eyes that still held the memory of the Yoruba lands she'd been stolen from. Them eyes carried the ocean, carried the spirits of 24 souls who'd thrown themselves overboard rather than live in bondage, carried prayers in a language these white devils couldn't understand and never would. The old ones warned us, some spirits too strong to break. Iodel was that kind. She stood on the auction block with iron still on her ankles, and when the auctioneer, a red-faced man named Hutchins who'd sold more human flesh than the devil himself, when he grabbed her arm to show her muscle, she looked at him direct. Didn't lower her eyes, just looked, and something in that gaze made him step back, made him stumble over his own words. "Strong-backed woman," he hollered to the crowd, recovering his composure. "Good for field work, good for breeding, good for whatever work you need done. What am I bid?" The bidding started. White men in fine coats called out numbers like they was buying a horse. $20, $30, $45. Iodel stood there, and though her body was on that block, her soul was somewhere else. Somewhere they couldn't reach, couldn't chain, couldn't own. A plantation owner from the low country bought her. Man named Jeremiah Whitlock, grandfather to the boy who'd one day learn that birthday gifts can kill. He paid $60 and considered it a bargain for such a healthy specimen. Had his driver put her in the wagon with 6 other newly bought souls, and they rode out toward the plantation that would become their prison. In them days of deep sorrow, the journey from Charleston to the Whitlock plantation took 2 days. 2 days of Iodel staring at the red clay roads, at the moss hanging from the cypress trees like the hanged bodies she'd seen on the way, at a land that looked nothing like home and everything like hell's front porch. When they reached the plantation, they was put in the quarters, rough cabins made of pine wood and clay, so full of cracks you could see daylight through them. 12 souls to a cabin meant for 6. Dirt floors, 1 fireplace, blankets thin as hope. The overseer was a man named Cyrus Beck, mean as a cottonmouth and twice as venomous. He explained the rules with his whip in hand. Up before dawn, work till you drop. Any sass gets the post, any runnin' gets the dogs, any resistance gets death. "You ain't people no more," he told him that first night, tobacco juice running down his chin. "You property. You belong to Master Whitlock, same as his hogs and his horses. The sooner you learn that, the easier your suffering gonna be." But some lessons don't take. Adele learned the plantation, learned it like a hunter learns prey, learned which overseer hit hardest, which paths the paddy rollers took at night, which roots grew in the swamp, which elders in the quarters knew the old ways, the African ways, the conjure and root work that white folks called superstition, but we knew was power. She survived 2 years in them fields, bore a daughter in the 3rd year, a child that came from violence from the master's son taking what he wanted in the dark of the gin house. But that baby girl, they named her Judith, and she carried her mama's eyes. Them ocean eyes, them remembering eyes. Iadil taught Judith everything she could before the fever took her in the winter of 1807. Taught her the names of the Orishas, taught her which plants heal and which ones kill. Taught her that chains can hold the body but never the spirit. Taught her that memory is resistance, and as long as you remember who you was, they ain't won. Judith grew up knowing her mama died free inside, even if her body was buried in the plantation cemetery where they didn't even mark the graves with names, just numbers. And Judith, when she was old enough, bore a daughter of her own. Another forced child, another seed planted in suffering. But this daughter they called Delia. And folks swear on their lives she came into this world with rage already burning in her chest. Delia was born in 1831, year of Nat Turner's rebellion, year the whole South trembled with fear of slave uprisings. Born under a blood moon, the old women said. Born with a caul over her face, which meant she could see spirits, could walk between worlds. Her mama Judith tried to protect her, tried to keep her soft despite the hardness all around. But the plantation had other plans. Delia was 10 years old when she first saw the whipping post do its work. A man named Samuel had been caught with a pass he'd forged himself, trying to visit his wife on a neighboring plantation. They stripped him to the waist and tied him to that post, and the overseer's whip sang its terrible song. 20 lashes. Samuel's back opened up like a plowed field, blood running down to water the ground. Delia watched. Her mama tried to cover her eyes, but Delia pushed the hands away, watched every stroke, counted every scream. And something hardened in her that day, hardened like iron in a forge. She was 12 when the worst day came, the day that would plant the seed of everything that followed. Master Whitlock, the grandson now, Harlan Whitlock, mean-spirited and ambitious, he decided to sell off some of his stock to pay gambling debts. Made a list of names. Judith's name was on it. They came for her on a Tuesday morning, right after breakfast. Delia was helping her mama wash clothes in the big iron pot behind the quarters when the overseer and 2 drivers showed up. "Judith," Beck hollered, "get your things. You've been sold." The world stopped. Just stopped like the sun had froze in the sky. Judith dropped the washing paddle, turned to look at Delia, and in that look passed everything. Every story, every prayer, every ounce of love and sorrow and desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this wasn't real. "No," Judith whispered. Then louder, "No, not without my daughter. Please, Lord Jesus, not without my child." Beck laughed. Actually laughed. "Your child stay here, she Whitlock property. You've been sold to the McAllister plantation down in Georgia. Wagon leaves in an hour." Delia ran to her mama, grabbed her skirt, held on like drowning folks hold driftwood. Mama, don't go, don't leave me." But what could Judith do? What could any of them do? The drivers pulled them apart, Judith screaming, Delia screaming, the whole quarters fallen silent with the weight of one more family torn to pieces. They dragged Judith to the wagon. She fought like a wildcat, clawing, biting, calling on God and all the ancestors to strike these devils down. But devils don't strike easy. Last thing Delia saw was her mama's face in the back of that wagon, tears streaming, mouth moving in words Delia couldn't hear but knew anyway. "I love you. Survive. Remember." The wagon pulled away, dust rising behind it like smoke from a funeral pyre. Delia stood there in the yard, 12 years old, alone in the world except for the quarters full of folks who loved her but couldn't protect her. stood there till the dust settled, till the sun moved, till her legs gave out and she collapsed in the dirt. The old root woman, Tia Ruth, came and picked her up gentle-like, carried her back to the cabin, laid her on the straw mattress and whispered, "Cry now, child. Cry hard and long. But when you done crying, you remember your mama's blood runs in you. And that blood remembers Africa, remembers freedom, remembers how to survive." Delia cried for 3 days straight, and on the 4th day she stopped, didn't shed another tear for years, just watched, just learned, just waited. Her heart had learned to do what iron does when it gets heated and hammered. It got harder, got sharper, got ready. The Whitlock plantation stretched across 3,000 acres of Mississippi Delta land, black soil so rich it grew cotton tall as a man by August. The big house sat at the center of it all like a white crown on a dark head, 2 stories of painted wood and columns, galleries wrapped around both floors, windows that caught the sun and threw it back like they was made of diamonds. Master Harlan Whitlock inherited it all when his father died in 1840. Inherited the land, the big house, the cotton gin, the slaves. All 147 souls who worked the fields, the stables, the kitchen, the gardens. Inherited the whipping post too, and the auction block they kept in the side yard for when traders came through. Harlan was 32 when he became master, and he took to power like a duck to water. Man with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached him, thin lips that only opened to give orders or quote scripture. He was one of them white folks who kept a Bible in one hand and a whip in the other, who'd read Psalms on Sunday and sell a child away from its mama on Monday without blinking. His wife, Constance Whitlock, was a pale woman from a plantation family in South Carolina. Fragile-like, with skin so white you could see the blue veins beneath, hair the color of corn silk always pinned up proper. She spent her days in the big house arranging flowers, playing piano, and pretending the wealth she lived in didn't come from broken backs and stolen lives. They had one child together, one son. Thomas Harlan Whitlock, born in 1838, pride of his father's eye and curse on all the quarters folk. Even as a boy, Thomas had meanness in him. Not the explosive kind, the quiet kind, the calculating kind. He'd pull wings off flies. He'd throw rocks at the quarter children when no one was looking. He'd stand and watch when the overseer doled out punishments, and his face would show nothing, absolutely nothing, like he was watching clouds pass instead of human agony. Delia first came to work in the big house when she was 15 years old. They needed someone to help in the kitchen, and the head cook, an old woman named Essie, picked Delia for her quick hands and quiet ways. "Keep your head down," Essie warned her that first morning back in 1846. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look the master or mistress direct in the eye. And for God's sake, stay far from young Thomas. That boy got his granddaddy's devil in him." Delia learned quick. Learned to move through the big house like a ghost. Learned to anticipate what was needed before it was asked for. Learned to make herself small, invisible, unthreatening. The kitchen was in a separate building behind the main house, a brick structure with a massive fireplace and a work table long as a coffin. This was Delia's world now. Up before dawn to get the fires going, bread baking, coffee boiling. Work straight through till evening supper was served and cleaned up after. The work was hard, but it beat the cotton fields where folks dropped from heat stroke regular as rain. In the kitchen, at least there was shade. At least there was food close by when hunger got fierce. Lord of glory. But those were strange days. Delia living in 2 worlds at once. The world of the big house where everything was polished and pretty and evil, and the world of the quarters where everything was rough and real and suffering. In the big house, she saw how white folks lived, saw the food they ate, roast beef and sweet potatoes and pies thick with cream, saw the clothes they wore, silk and lace and buttons made of pearl, saw how they talked to each other, polite and proper, like suffering didn't exist in the world at all. Then she'd walk back to the quarters at night and see the truth. See the children with bellies swollen from hunger. See the men and women so tired they could barely lift their heads. See the scars on backs where the whip had done its teaching. It was like living in 2 countries that spoke different languages, except both was prisons, and both was ruled by the same wicked king. Thomas was 8 years old when Delia started working in the kitchen. She'd see him sometimes playing in the yard, always alone. He didn't have playmates. His mama thought the local white children too common. And of course the quarter children were beneath notice except as targets for his cruelty. She watched him grow, watched the meanness settle deeper into his bones year by year. By the time he was 14, he was already going to the fields with his father, learning how to manage slaves, how to extract the most work for the least cost, how to break a person's will without breaking their body so bad they couldn't work. Delia was 20 years old, working the bread oven on a July morning in 1851, when Harlan Whitlock walked into the kitchen with a man she'd never seen before. The stranger was a slave trader from Natchez, a portly man in a dusty suit who walked through the quarters like he was shopping for furniture. He'd come to buy stock, and Harlan was in the selling mood. They didn't buy Delia. Instead, they bought old Marcus, who'd raised 3 generations of Whitlock children but was too old for field work now. Bought young Sarah, who was 16 and strong-backed. Bought Sarah's baby boy, still nursing. Delia stood at the oven and heard Sarah screaming from clear across the yard when they took her child. Heard it, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, just crack. Like a door opening to a room she'd kept locked. That night in the quarters, Tia Ruth held Sarah while the girl wailed and wailed till she had no voice left. Delia sat in the corner, watching, remembering her own mama being dragged away 9 years ago. "Why God let this happen?" Sarah finally whispered, her voice raw as an open wound. "Why He let them take my baby?" Tia Ruth rocked her slow. "God didn't do this, child. White folks did. And far as I can tell, God either ain't watching or ain't strong enough to stop 'em. But the ancestors watching. And they remember. They keep count." Delia listened to those words and stored them away like seeds. The years moved on. Seasons cycled. Cotton planted, grew, picked, sold. People born, people died. People disappeared into the trader's wagon. The plantation kept grinding souls into profit. Year after year, regular as clockwork. Delia turned 23. Still working the kitchen, still quiet, still watching. She'd learned every corner of the big house. Learned which floorboards creaked, which windows didn't lock proper, where Harlan kept his money, where Constance hid her laudanum bottles. She learned Thomas too. Learned his routines, his habits, his tastes. He was 15 now, gangly and pimpled, voice changing, still cruel but in new ways. She'd catch him staring at the quarter girls sometimes, a look in his eyes that made her skin crawl. And then came the spring of 1854, Thomas's 16th birthday approaching, Harlan planning something big, talking about it at dinner loud enough that the house slaves heard every word. "My boy's becoming a man," Harlan announced one evening, glass of bourbon in hand. "Needs a proper gift, something to mark the occasion." Constance looked up from her needlework. "What did you have in mind, dear?" Harlan smiled, that cold smile. "I'm thinking one of the house girls. Young Thomas needs to learn certain responsibilities, and I got just the one in mind." Delia was serving dessert when he said it. She stood there holding a silver tray with slices of pecan pie, and she felt the words hit her before she even knew what they meant. Harlan's eyes found her, stayed on her. Delia there. She's clean, healthy, well-mannered. Perfect for teaching the boy. The room went cold. No, the room was always cold in that house. But Delia felt it different this time. Felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the place where her grandmother's ocean memory still lived. Constance frowned slightly. "Harlan, she's a kitchen girl. Surely. She'll do fine," Harlan interrupted. "Matter of fact, it's settled. Thomas's birthday is in 3 weeks. We'll clean her up, put her in a proper dress, and present her to him after the cake is served." He said it casual. Said it like he was talking about giving his son a horse, a rifle, a pocket watch. Delia stood there holding that tray, and something inside her, something that had been cracking slowly for 23 years, finally broke open. Not with a scream, not with violence, just broke open quiet-like, and in the space it left, something else grew, something patient, something deadly, something that knew how to wait. She set the pie down gentle. "Yes, master," she said softly, walked back to the kitchen, put away the dishes, cleaned the counters, banked the fire for the night, did everything exactly the same as always, then walked back to the quarters through the dark, the spring night heavy with the smell of magnolia and fresh-turned earth. Tia Ruth was sitting outside her cabin smoking her pipe when Delia passed. "Chile," the old woman called softly. "Come here." Delia stopped, stood there in the moonlight. "I know that look," Ruth said. "That's the look of a woman decidin' things. What you decidin'?" Delia was quiet a long time. Then, "Tia Ruth, you remember those plants you showed me? The ones that grow by the swamp? The ones you said could cure or kill?" The old woman nodded slow. "I remember." "Teach me," Delia said. "Teach me everything." And that's how it started. That's how birthday cake became funeral supper. That's how one woman's suffering became a whole family's judgment. The countdown had begun. 3 weeks passed like a slow death march. Every morning Delia woke in the quarters, and every morning she walked to that big house knowing what was coming, knowing the date was circled on Harlan's calendar like a target. Tia Ruth taught her in secret. Late nights behind the smokehouse by candlelight so dim you could barely see. The old woman showed her roots and leaves and bark, showed her what the earth gives and what it takes back. "This here's pokeweed berry," Ruth whispered, holding up the dark purple fruit. "Beautiful, ain't it? Sweet looking. But the root, Lord have mercy. 3 drops of juice from this root, and a man's heart gonna slow till it stops. Quiet like going to sleep." Delia learned which mushrooms grew in the dark parts of the swamp, learned how Jimson weed could make a person see devils, learned that oleander, pretty as it was growing by the big house gallery, carried death in every leaf. But she didn't act. Not yet. Just watched. Just waited. Just stored knowledge like a squirrel stores nuts for winter. The birthday morning came bright and hot, typical Mississippi May weather. The big house buzzed like a disturbed hornet's nest, Constance directing servants, Harlan inspecting everything twice, Thomas sleeping late like young masters do. Delia worked the kitchen alongside Essie and 2 other housegirls. They was making a feast fit for kings. Roast pork with crackling skin, candied yams, butter beans, cornbread, biscuits light as air. And the cake. Sweet Jesus, that cake. 4 layers tall, covered in white frosting smooth as porcelain. Essie had been working on it for 2 days. Her specialty, her pride. She decorated it with sugar roses and little pearl candies that cost more than a field hand earned in a year. "This the finest cake I ever made," Essie declared, stepping back to admire her work. "Young master gonna remember this birthday rest of his life." Delia looked at that cake and thought, yes, he surely will. By afternoon, the guests started arriving. White folks from neighboring plantations dressed in their finest, men in tailcoats despite the heat, women in silk dresses with hoops so wide they could barely fit through doorways. They gathered on the gallery, drinking mint juleps, laughing loud. Inside, Delia was being prepared. Constance herself supervised, which was unusual. The mistress rarely came to the servants' quarters, but today she brought a dress, pale blue cotton, simple but new with buttons down the back. "Put this on," Constance said, not meeting Delia's eyes. "And wash yourself properly. Use the soap I brought." 2 housegirls helped Delia bathe in the wooden tub, scrubbing her skin till it hurt. They oiled her hair, pinned it up proper, buttoned her into that blue dress that felt like a burial shroud. When Delia looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. Looked like a doll, a present wrapped and ready. "You look right pretty," one of the girls whispered, pity thick in her voice. Delia said nothing, just stood there, heart beating steady as a funeral drum. Evening came. The sun dropped low, painting the sky red as blood. In the dining room, they seated Thomas at the head of the long table, Harlan and Constance on either side. The guests filled the other chairs, everyone talking, drinking, celebrating the young master's 16th year. Delia served, carried platters, poured wine, kept her face blank as a closed door. After supper, they moved to the gallery. Essie brought out the cake, candles blazing. Folks gathered round singing happy birthday, their voices floating on the warm night air. Thomas smiled, a thin, anticipating smile. He blew out the candles and everyone clapped. Harlan stood, raising his glass. "My son, 16 years old today, becoming a man." He paused for effect. "And every man needs certain guidance, certain experience." He gestured, and an overseer pushed Delia forward. "This is Delia," Harlan announced. "She belongs to you now, son, to do with as you please. Happy birthday." The white folks laughed. Some of the women looked away, uncomfortable but silent. The men grinned, nodding approval. Thomas looked at Delia the way a cat looks at a caught mouse. "Thank you, Father." "Take her upstairs," Harlan said. "We'll finish the cake down here." Thomas took Delia's wrist. His hand was clammy, nervous despite the cruelty in his eyes. He pulled her toward the house. Delia followed, climbed the stairs, walked down the hallway to Thomas's room, a space she'd cleaned 100 times but never entered like this. He closed the door behind them. The latch clicked. Outside, she could hear music starting, fiddle and banjo, laughter, celebration. Inside that room, there was only silence, and the beginning of something that would haunt the Whitlock name forever. Thomas stepped closer. "You know what you're here for?" Delia looked at him, really looked. Saw the boy pretending to be a man. Saw the evil he'd inherited like land and slaves. Saw the future he thought was his. "Yes, master," she whispered. And somewhere deep inside, where rage lived quiet and patient, she began counting. Counting days. Counting opportunities. Counting the ways a person could die, slow or fast, painful or peaceful. The party continued below. The cake was cut and served. Everyone ate, celebrating young Thomas's passage into manhood. None of them knew they was celebrating at a funeral that just hadn't happened yet. Some things got no words. Some suffering runs so deep the tongue can't shape it into language. This here's one of them chapters where I got to speak around the edges, 'cause the center too dark to look at direct. That first night in Thomas's room, Delia learned what it means to separate soul from body, learned to float above herself, to watch from somewhere else while her flesh stayed behind to endure what had to be endured. The old ones warned us about this. Back in Africa, the griots told of souls that could walk out of themselves during terrible times, leave the body to suffer while the spirit stayed safe. Delia found that place without even knowing she was looking for it. When it was over, Thomas fell asleep quick, satisfied with himself. Delia lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling and felt nothing. No tears, no shame, no fear. Just a vast empty space where those feelings should have been. She rose quiet-like, gathered the blue dress from where it had fallen, put it on with steady hands, walked out of that room like a ghost, down the stairs while the house slept, back to the quarters where at least the suffering was shared. Tia Ruth was waiting, didn't ask no questions, just opened her arms and Delia walked into them. The old woman held her, rocked her slow, hummed an old song from across the water. "You still here, Chili," Ruth whispered. "You still breathing, that mean you ain't lost, not yet." But something had changed, something fundamental, like a river changing course after a storm. The nights that followed became routine. Thomas would send for her. Not every night, but often enough. Sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times. There was no pattern to predict, no way to prepare except to steel herself whenever a house slave came to the quarters after dark, calling her name. She'd walk to the big house in the moonlight, climb those stairs, enter that room, let her soul step aside while her body did what was required. In the mornings, she'd return to the kitchen and work. Knead bread dough, stir pots, peel vegetables, keep her face empty, keep her voice quiet, keep her rage buried deep where it could ferment into something useful. The other quarter folks knew. How could they not? Everyone knew what happened when a master or his son took a girl for himself. It was old as slavery itself, common as cotton. Some looked at Delia with pity. Some looked away, unable to bear witness to suffering they couldn't stop. A few of the men, young bucks with fire still in them, looked at her with helpless fury, knowing if they tried to protect her, they'd just get themselves killed, and her situation wouldn't change. "Keep your head down," Essie told her one morning in the kitchen, voice low. "Survive it. That's all you can do. Survive and pray he gets tired of you eventually." But Delia wasn't praying for him to get tired. She was planning for something else entirely. 6 weeks after that birthday, Delia missed her monthly bleeding, waited another 2 weeks to be sure, then knew. She was carrying Thomas's child. Lord have mercy, the weight of that knowledge nearly crushed her. She'd seen it happen to other quarter women, belly swelling with the master's baby, or the overseer's baby, or the trader's baby. Watched them birth children who'd be slaves from first breath. Watched them love those babies anyway, fierce and desperate, knowing every day that child could be sold away. Delia couldn't do it. Couldn't carry this seed. Couldn't birth something that would tie her to Thomas forever. Couldn't love something made from violence. She went to Tia Ruth that night, told her quiet-like. The old woman's face showed no surprise, just nodded slow. "You want to keep it or lose it?" "Lose it," Delia said. No hesitation. Ruth fetched her medicine bag, pulled out a small bundle of dried herbs, tansy, pennyroyal, black cohosh. "Make a tea with these. Strong. Drink it 3 times a day for 3 days. It's gonna hurt something terrible. You're gonna bleed heavy, but the seed won't take root." Delia took the bundle. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Chiley. This kind of work come with a price. Not just the pain in your body, the pain in your spirit too. You gonna remember this the rest of your days." "I'll remember everything anyway," Delia said. "One more memory won't make no difference." She brewed the tea that night, drank it down despite the bitter taste, did the same the next morning and the next evening. On the 3rd day, the cramping started. Pain that doubled her over, made her gasp. She worked through it. Couldn't show weakness. Couldn't let them see. That night, alone in the quarters while the others slept, the bleeding came heavy and dark. Delia knelt on the dirt floor, arms wrapped around her middle, and felt something leave her body that was never meant to be. Tia Ruth was there, always there when it mattered. She cleaned Delia up, made her drink willow bark tea for the pain, covered her with a thin blanket. "Sleep now," Ruth said. "Tomorrow you still gotta get up, still gotta work, still gotta survive." But Delia didn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, staring at nothing, and felt something inside her crystallize into pure, cold purpose. Thomas had taken her body, had tried to plant his seed in her, had used her like she was nothing but a vessel for his pleasure, his property, his legacy. He'd made a mistake, though, a terrible mistake. He'd assumed she was powerless, assumed she'd just accept it, assumed she'd bear his children and raise them in bondage and die without ever fighting back. But lying there bleeding on that dirt floor, Delia made a vow. Made it to her grandmother who'd crossed the ocean in chains. Made it to her mother who'd been sold away crying. Made it to every woman in the quarters who'd suffered the same fate. She'd survive this. She'd endure. She'd wait. And when the time was right, when she'd learned everything she needed to learn, when the opportunity presented itself perfect and clear, she'd make them pay. Every last one of them. Delia thought she'd hidden it well. The bleeding, the weakness, the way she moved slower for a few days, pain still gnawing at her insides. But Constance Whitlock had sharp eyes when it came to certain things. 2 weeks after Delia lost the baby that never was, the mistress called her to the parlor. "Come here, girl," Constance said, voice cold as January frost. Delia approached, kept her eyes down proper-like. Constance circled her slow, examining, then reached out and pressed hard fingers into Delia's belly. Delia flinched, the spot still tender. "You were pregnant," Constance stated. Not a question. "And now you're not. What did you do?" "Nothing, mistress," Delia lied smooth. "Just started my monthly is all." Constance's hand cracked across Delia's face so fast she didn't see it coming. The room spun, tasted blood. "Don't lie to me." Constance's voice went high and tight. "I know the signs. I've had 3 miscarriages myself. You did something, took something, killed it." Before Delia could answer, Harlan walked in, drawn by the commotion. "What's this?" This girl was carrying Thomas's child and got rid of it. Constance pointed at Delia like she was evidence of a crime. "She's a murderer!" The word hung in the air. Murderer, like Delia had killed something real instead of preventing something forced. Harlan's face went hard. "That true?" Delia stood there, blood dripping from her split lip, and made a choice. Could lie. Could deny. Could try to talk her way out. But what was the point? They'd believe what they wanted anyway. "Yes, master," she said quiet. "It's true." Harlan's jaw clenched. "You destroyed valuable property. That child would have been worth money. Would have been strong stock. Stock he called an unborn baby stock, like cattle, like cotton yield. "Take her to the post," Harlan ordered the overseer who'd appeared in the doorway. 20 lashes. Make sure everyone sees. Need to remind the others what happens when they destroy the master's property." They dragged Delia outside to the whipping post in the yard between the big house and the quarters. The overseer, a new man named Collins who was meaner than most, tied her wrists to the iron ring bolted into the wood. The whole plantation gathered because they had to. Master's orders, field hands pulled from work, house slaves lined up, quarter children hiding behind their mama's skirts, everyone forced to witness. Thomas stood on the gallery watching, didn't stop it, didn't say nothing, just watched with those empty eyes. Tia Ruth was in the crowd, and when Delia caught her gaze, the old woman mouthed words, "Stay strong, don't break." Collins ripped the back of Delia's dress open. The first lash came like fire, the second like lightning. By the fifth, she'd bit through her bottom lip, trying not to scream. Don't give them the satisfaction. Don't give them your voice. But the 10th lash broke through her resolve. A cry escaped. Not a scream, but a low animal sound of pure agony. The whip sang its terrible song. 15, 16, 17. Delia's back was on fire, skin splitting like overripe fruit. Blood ran warm down her spine, soaking into what was left of her dress. 18, 19, 20. When it was done, Collins untied her, and Delia collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Lay there in the dirt, tasting blood and dust. Tia Ruth and 2 other women rushed forward, carried her to the quarters, laid her face down on a straw mattress, started cleaning the wounds with water and salt. The pain was beyond words, beyond tears, just pure white-hot suffering that made breathing hard. "I got to clean it good," Ruth said, "or it'll fester. This gonna hurt worse than the whipping. You ready?" Delia nodded, face pressed into the mattress. Ruth poured whiskey on the wounds. Delia screamed into the straw, body convulsing. Then Ruth packed the cuts with a poultice made from plantain leaves and spider webs, old African medicine to stop infection and help healing. For 3 days, Delia lay on that mattress burning with fever. The wounds wept and festered despite Ruth's treatment. She drifted in and out, seeing visions. Her grandmother on the slave ship, her mother crying in the auction block, unborn children who'd never breathe. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Delia woke weak but clear-minded. Tia Ruth sat beside her, keeping watch. "You back with us?" "Yes'm," Delia whispered. "Good, 'cause I got something important to tell you." Ruth leaned close. "What they did to you, that whipping, that punishment for not wanting to carry your rapist's child, that's the proof. Proof that they ain't people. They demons in human skin." Delia nodded slow. "So when you do what I know you're gonna do," Ruth continued, voice dropping to barely a whisper, "when you make them pay, don't you feel 1 ounce of guilt? Don't you question if it's right or wrong? They drew first blood. They always do. You just settling accounts." "How you know what I'm planning?" Delia asked. Ruth smiled, sad. "Chilly. I been knowing since you asked me about them poison plants. I ain't stupid, and I ain't gonna stop you. Some things need doing, and the Lord gonna understand even if the preachers don't." She pulled out a small cloth bundle from her apron. "This here's all the knowledge I got. Recipes, doses, timings. I wrote it down best I could. You study it when you able. Delia took the bundle, held it close. "Just promise me one thing," Ruth said. "When you do it, make sure it counts. Make sure they remember. Make sure the story gets told. 'Cause that's how we survive. Through the stories. Through the memory." "I promise," Delia said. And lying there on that blood-stained mattress, back torn to ribbons, Delia felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, never peace, but purpose, clear and cold and absolute. They'd beaten her body, but they'd made a mistake doing it. They'd given her rage a righteous cause. They'd turned pain into fuel. The Whitlocks thought they'd taught her a lesson. What they'd actually done was guarantee their own destruction. Delia just had to be patient, just had to wait for the right moment, just had to survive long enough to see it through. And survive she would. Because revenge, real revenge, required the Avenger to be alive. 2 months passed while Delia's back healed. The scars raised up thick as rope, marking her forever. She'd wear long sleeves rest of her life, but underneath, she'd always carry the map of that day's cruelty. Thomas stopped sending for her after the whipping, not out of mercy. He just didn't like looking at the damage. Moved on to a younger girl, 14 years old, fresh and unmarked. The cycle continued. Different victim, same evil. But Delia didn't waste the reprieve. She studied Tia Ruth's bundle of knowledge like scripture, learned the plants by heart, memorized doses and preparations, learned which herbs killed fast and which killed slow, which left signs and which looked like natural death. Late at night, when the quarters slept, she'd slip out to the edges of the plantation where wilderness still held claim. The swamp beckoned. Dark water reflecting moonlight, cypress trees draped in Spanish moss, ground soft and treacherous. This was dangerous territory. Paddy rollers rode at night, looking for runaways. Getting caught out after dark meant whipping at best, death at worst. But Delia moved like a ghost, learning the patrol schedules, knowing when to hide, when to run, when to freeze completely still. She found the plants Ruth had taught her about, white snakeroot growing in the shaded hollows, its leaves and stems full of poison that passed through into milk and killed slow and mysterious. Oleander with its pretty pink flowers, every part deadly. Water hemlock at the swamp edge, roots that looked like parsnips but caused convulsions and death. But the one she focused on most was pokeweed. Grew tall as a man by late summer, berries dark purple and tempting looking, but the root, Lord have mercy, the root was pure death if prepared right. Cook it slow, extract the essence, and you got something that would stop a heart quiet like, make it seem like natural failure. Delia harvested careful, just small amounts, nothing that would be noticed missing. She dried the roots in a hollow tree, ground them to powder when they were ready, stored everything in a tiny clay jar she kept buried beneath the floorboards of the quarters. Tia Ruth watched over her education like a proud teacher. "You learning good," she said one night, examining the powder Delia had made. "This here's strong work, but you gotta be patient, gotta wait for the right time." "I'm patient," Delia said. And it was true. Rage had taught her patience. Every day of suffering was just another reason to make sure she did it right. She studied the big house too. Watched Essie make cakes for every occasion. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday suppers. Watched how much flour, how much sugar, how the batter mixed. Learned that sweetness could hide any bitter taste if you used enough of it. "You taking real interest in the baking," Essie noticed one day, sounding pleased. "Maybe I teach you proper. You got good hands for it." "Yes'm," Delia said, "I'd like that." So Essie taught her. Taught her to cream butter and sugar till fluffy as clouds. Taught her to fold in flour gentle so the cake stayed light. Taught her the secret to the frosting. Beat it long and hard till it got smooth as silk. "The master's favorite is the 4-layer cake," Essie said. "We make it every year for his birthday and young Thomas's birthday. Been doing it since before you was born. Family tradition." Delia absorbed this information like earth absorbs rain. Filed it away. Added it to the plan that was forming slow and certain in her mind. She learned other things too. Learned that Harlan had a weak heart, got short of breath climbing stairs, turned red in the face when he got angry. Learned that Constance took laudanum every night for her nerves, mixing it in her tea. Learned that Thomas had developed a taste for sweets, would eat himself sick if allowed. All of it useful. All of it pieces of a puzzle she was assembling in secret. One night, 6 months after the whipping, Delia sat with Tia Ruth behind the smokehouse. The old woman was teaching her the final lessons. "Now listen here," Ruth said, voice serious. "Root work ain't just about plants and potions. It's about intention, about focusing your will, about calling on the ancestors to witness and approve." She pulled out a small bottle filled with dark liquid. "This here's graveyard dirt mixed with whiskey and blood. You use this to seal a curse. Make it binding, make it permanent." "How it work?" Delia asked. "When you ready, when you done the deed, you take some of this and pour it on the ground where they gonna be buried. You say the names of your people who suffered. You call on the spirits to accept this offering. Then it's done. Can't be undone. Can't be forgiven." Delia took the bottle, felt the weight of it. "And you sure this right? Sure God won't punish me?" Ruth looked at her hard. "Child, white folks been using God to justify slavery for 200 years. They say the Bible supports it, that we cursed through Ham, that we meant to serve them. You think that God gonna side with them over you?" Delia shook her head. "The God I know," Ruth continued, "the God of Moses who led people out of bondage, who sent plagues on Pharaoh, that God understands justice, understands when the oppressed strike back. Maybe the white folks' God condemns it. But our God, our ancestors, they gonna stand with you." Delia felt tears come for the first time in months. Not tears of sadness, tears of something else. Resolution, righteousness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Ruth said. "Just make it count. Make sure the story gets told. Make sure our people remember that we ain't always powerless. Sometimes we bite back." That night, walking back to her cabin under stars that seemed brighter than usual, Delia felt different. Felt like she'd crossed some invisible line. Was she a murderer now in her heart, if not yet in deed? Or was she something else? A soldier? An avenger? An instrument of divine justice? She didn't know, didn't care. She just knew that Thomas's next birthday was coming in 7 months. And this time, it would be different. This time, the gift wouldn't be her. It would be death. Wrapped in frosting and served with a smile. Winter came to the plantation, and with it came a stranger. New overseer hired to replace Collins, who'd drunk himself to death on cheap whiskey. Man named Caleb Morrison, 28 years old, from Virginia Way. First time Delia saw him was a cold January morning in 1855. He rode up on a brown mare, saddlebags heavy, hat pulled low. Harlan met him in the yard, shook his hand, showed him around the property like he was giving a tour of hell itself. Caleb was different from the start. Didn't carry the whip loose and ready like Collins had. Kept it coiled on his belt, used it rarely. When he spoke to the field hands, his voice was firm, but not cruel. He called people by their names instead of boy or gal. The quarter folks noticed, whispered about it cautious-like, not wanting to hope too much. Hope was dangerous on a plantation. Hope could get you killed. Delia noticed too, watched him from the kitchen window when he passed. Saw how he looked at the slaves, not with pity exactly, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw people instead of property. 3 weeks after he arrived, Delia was carrying water from the well when she stumbled on the icy ground. The bucket flew, water splashing everywhere, and she went down hard on her knees. Before she could get up, Caleb was there, extended his hand to help her. Delia froze. Overseers didn't help slaves, didn't touch them except to punish. This was strange, maybe dangerous. "You hurt?" he asked, voice gentle. "No, sir," she said, quiet, not taking his hand. Got up on her own, brushed dirt from her skirt. Caleb lowered his hand but didn't move away, looked at her direct, and for a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them. Just a flicker, just a spark, but real as lightning. "You work in the big house?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Kitchen, mostly," he nodded. "I seen you around. You got a name." "Delia, sir." "Delia," he repeated, like tasting the word. "That's a good name. Biblical." Then he picked up the bucket, filled it from the well himself, handed it back to her. "Be careful on the ice, ground's treacherous this time of year." She took the bucket, confused and wary. "Thank you, sir." Walked back to the kitchen, feeling his eyes on her back. Didn't know what to make of it, didn't trust it. Couldn't afford to. But over the following weeks, Caleb kept showing up in her awareness. Kept being different. When a field hand fell sick, Caleb sent him to rest instead of forcing him to work. When a child stole a biscuit from the kitchen, Caleb looked the other way. Small mercies, but mercies nonetheless. Delia tried not to notice, tried to stay focused on her plan. Thomas's birthday was coming in 5 months. She had pokeweed root drying, had the recipe memorized, had the perfect opportunity taking shape in her mind. Couldn't afford distractions, couldn't afford feelings, couldn't afford to see Caleb as anything but another white man who'd eventually disappoint. But one evening in late February, when she was walking back to the quarters after dark, Caleb found her near the smokehouse. "Delia," he called soft. "Wait." She stopped, heart hammering. Being alone with an overseer after dark never meant anything good. He approached slow, hands visible and empty. "Don't be scared, I just wanted to talk." "We shouldn't be talking, sir. I need to get back." "I know," he said. "I know the rules, but I also know. I seen the scars on your back. Seen them when you were reaching for something high and your dress shifted. 20 lashes, I'd guess. Maybe more." Delia said nothing, kept her face blank. "What I'm trying to say," Caleb continued, voice dropping to barely a whisper, "is I know what this place is. I know what happens here, and I'm sorry for it." "Sorry don't change nothing," Delia said, surprised by her own boldness. "No," he agreed. "It don't, but maybe other things can." He looked around, making sure they was alone, then leaned closer. "There's a network, underground railroad they call it, safe houses all the way to the north. To freedom, I got connections, I could help you get out." The words hung in the cold air like impossible promises. Freedom, the north, escape. Delia's heart wanted to leap at it, wanted to believe. But her mind was sharper now, harder. She'd learned not to trust white men's promises, no matter how kind they seemed. "Why you telling me this?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "Because," Caleb said, and his voice cracked slightly. "Because I can't watch what's happening here and do nothing. Because I got a conscience even if most folks think overseers don't. Because you deserve better than this hell." Delia looked at him, really looked. Saw something in his face that might have been genuine, might have been good, or might have been the most dangerous lie she'd encountered yet. "I'll think about it," she finally said. "Don't think too long," Caleb warned. "Opportunities like this don't come often, and I might not be here forever. Harlan already suspects I'm too soft." He stepped back, tipped his hat. "You know where to find me when you decide." Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Delia stood there, shaking, from cold, from fear, from something that felt dangerously close to hope. For 3 weeks, Delia wrestled with the choice. Freedom on one side, revenge on the other. Could she have both? Could she trust Caleb enough to try? She talked to Tia Ruth about it, quiet and careful. "What you think?" Delia asked. "Think he telling the truth? Think he really helped me get north?" Ruth was silent a long time, smoking her pipe. Maybe he genuine. Maybe he a good white man, if such a thing exists. But good intentions don't stop bullets, Chili. Don't stop patty rollers. Don't guarantee you make it to freedom alive. "But if I could get out," Delia said, voice trailing off. "Then you'd live," Ruth finished. "You'd survive. But the Whitlocks would still be here, still doing what they do. Still using girls like you was used. Still breaking families. Still feeding off suffering like it's their daily bread." Delia nodded slow. That was the weight of it. Freedom meant survival. Revenge meant justice. Couldn't have both. But then Caleb made the choice for her. It was a March night, moon half full when he came to the quarters after everyone was asleep. Knocked soft on Delia's cabin door. She opened it, heart pounding. "What you doing here?" "Tonight," he whispered urgent. "We go tonight. I got a wagon waiting half-mile down the road. Guide gonna take you to the first station. From there, it's a network all the way to Ohio. You'll be free, Delia. Free. Everything in her wanted to say yes, wanted to run, wanted to leave this hell behind forever. But she thought of Tia Ruth, thought of the other quarter women suffering Thomas's attentions, thought of the poison she'd prepared so carefully, thought of the justice that would die if she left. Still, the pull was strong, maybe too strong. I need to get my things, she said. No time. We leave now or not at all. Delia made her decision, nodded, stepped out into the night with nothing but the dress on her back. They moved quick through the darkness, Caleb leading, Delia following, crossed the cotton fields where she'd seen so many people break under the sun, past the whipping post, dark and silent, headed toward the woods that bordered the plantation. Almost made it, too. They was 50 yards from the tree line when the dogs started barking. Then voices shouting, then torchlight blooming in the darkness behind them. "Run!" Caleb yelled, grabbing her hand. They ran, crashed through brush, stumbled over roots, lungs burning. The dogs got louder, the voices closer. Harlan's voice cut through the night. "Stop them! Shoot if you have to!" A gunshot cracked. Then another. Caleb jerked, stumbled, went down hard. "No!" Delia tried to help him up, but he pushed her away. "Go! Keep running!" But it was too late. The paddy rollers surrounded them. 5 white men on horses, dogs straining at leashes, rifles pointed. They dragged Caleb and Delia back to the plantation, threw them in the dirt in front of the big house where Harlan stood in his nightshirt, face purple with rage. "You," he pointed at Caleb. "I knew you was trouble. Knew you was too soft. But I never thought you'd steal from me." "She ain't property to be stolen," Caleb shouted back, blood running from his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him. "She's a person, a human being." Harlan's laugh was ugly. "You fool, you absolute fool. Guards, take him to the post." They stripped Caleb's shirt off, tied his wrists high, and while Delia was forced to watch, Harlan himself took the whip. "This is what happens," Harlan said, voice calm and terrible. "To those who forget their place, to those who betray their own kind for these animals." The first lash fell. Caleb grunted but didn't scream. 10 lashes, 20, 30. His back opened up like torn cloth, blood streaming. Delia tried to look away, but a guard grabbed her face, forced her to watch. 40 lashes, 50. Caleb stopped making sounds, just hung there, body twitching with each impact. At 60 lashes, he stopped moving altogether. "Enough," Harlan finally said. "Cut him down." They cut the ropes. Caleb's body fell like a sack of grain. Didn't move, didn't breathe. "He dead, master," one of the guards said. Harlan shrugged. "Throw him in the woods. Let the animals have him. As for her," he pointed at Delia. "Back to the big house. Back to my son's bed. And if she tries to run again, it won't be the whip. It'll be the rope." They dragged Delia away, but she kept her eyes on Caleb's broken body lying in the dirt. Kept her eyes on the blood pooling black in the torchlight. Kept her eyes on the cost of hope. Back in the quarters, Tia Ruth cleaned Delia up, held her while she shook. "I'm sorry, Chile," Ruth whispered. "Sorry you had to see that. Sorry you lost your chance." But Delia wasn't crying. Wasn't shaking from sorrow. Was shaking from rage so pure it felt like holy fire. She looked at Ruth with eyes that had gone cold and hard as river stones. "I ain't running no more," she said, voice flat and certain. "Ain't looking for freedom. Ain't waiting for rescue. I'm doing what I should have done from the start." "What's that?" Ruth asked, though she already knew. "I'm killing them," Delia said. "All of them. And I ain't gonna feel 1 ounce of mercy when I do it." She walked to the corner of the cabin, pulled up the loose floorboard, took out the clay jar of poison powder she'd hidden there, held it up to the candlelight, looked at it like a preacher looks at communion wine. "Caleb died believing in goodness," Delia said. "Died trying to save me. But I know better now. There ain't no salvation in this world. There's only justice, and justice got to be taken, not asked for." She put the jar in her apron pocket. patted it once. Thomas's birthday was 2 months away. The cake was already planned. Essie would make it like she did every year, and this time Delia would help. Would add one special ingredient that Essie would never know about. The countdown had truly begun. April came soft and cruel. Magnolias bloomed white as bone. The cotton was planted in straight rows that stretched to the horizon, and Delia moved through her days like a woman already dead, which made her fearless. They'd put her back in Thomas's rotation after the failed escape. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week she climbed those stairs, entered that room, let her body be used while her soul plotted murder. Thomas never noticed the change in her, never saw that her eyes had gone empty in a different way. He was too busy being 17, too busy learning cruelty from his father, too busy believing he'd live forever. But Delia saw everything. Noticed he'd developed a sweet tooth that was getting worse. Noticed he'd eat 2, sometimes 3 slices of cake when it was served. Noticed he never suspected nothing, never questioned, never imagined the quiet kitchen girl might be planning his death. She studied the kitchen routine with new intensity. Essie was getting older, her hands starting to shake with palsy. She relied more on Delia now, teaching her all the recipes, all the secrets. "You learning good," Essie said one afternoon while they worked on a practice cake for some guests' visit. "You got the touch, light hands, patient. That's what good baking needs, patience and care." Patience. That word again. Delia had patience in abundance now. Patience cold and sharp as a knife blade. She experimented in secret, mixed tiny amounts of the pokeweed powder with different substances, testing what masked the bitter taste best. Found that molasses worked well, sugar worked better. But the best was vanilla extract, strong enough to hide almost anything. She tested doses on rats she caught in the smokehouse, watched how much it took to kill them, how long it took, what symptoms they showed. One rat took 2 hours to die, convulsing and foaming. Another took 6 hours, just got weaker and weaker till it stopped breathing. Delia learned, adjusted, calculated. She needed the dose perfect, strong enough to kill certain, but slow enough that nobody would connect it to the cake immediately. Needed them to eat it, enjoy it, finish the party. Then later, when they got sick, it would look like bad food or illness or just bad luck. She ground the pokeweed root finer, mixed it with gopher dust from Tia Ruth, graveyard dirt, sulfur, salt, added a drop of her own blood for binding, spoke the names of her ancestors over it, calling them to witness and approve. This wasn't just poison. This was ritual. This was justice wrapped in ceremony. May arrived. Thomas's birthday was 3 weeks away. The invitations had been sent to neighboring plantations. Constance was planning the menu. Harlan was ordering new whiskey from Natchez. And Essie started planning the cake. 4 layers this year, she announced. Biggest one yet, young master turning 17. Almost a man grown. Delia volunteered to help more than usual. "Let me do the measuring, Miss Essie. Your hand's been hurting. I can do the heavy mixing." Essie was grateful. "You such a help, Chili. Don't know what I'd do without you." Delia smiled, kept her voice soft and sweet. "Just want to learn from the best. You the finest baker in the county." The old woman preened at the compliment, didn't notice the calculation in Delia's eyes. They practiced, made smaller cakes to perfect the technique. Delia memorized every step. Cream the butter and sugar first, add eggs one at a time, fold in flour gentle, add the vanilla last. That's when she'd do it, when the vanilla went in. The flavor was strong enough, the timing was perfect. Nobody would know. She tested the poison on one more rat, her final trial. Mixed the powder with vanilla extract exactly as she planned to do it. Fed it to the rat in a piece of cornbread. 6 hours later, the rat was dead. No convulsions, no foam. Just got weaker and weaker like its heart was giving out slow. Perfect. Tia Ruth helped her prepare the final dose. They did it at midnight on a dark moon. The best time for curses and vengeance, when the veil between worlds was thinnest. "You sure about this?" Ruth asked, not to discourage, just to confirm. "Sure as I ever been about anything," Delia said. Ruth nodded. Pulled out a chicken bone, some red thread, a nail from a coffin. "We gonna bind this proper. Make it so strong that even if you wanted to stop, you couldn't. Make it fate instead of choice." They worked in silence. Ruth chanted in a language older than English, words from Africa that had survived the Middle Passage. Delia repeated them, feeling power move through her hands. When they was done, the poison was sealed in a small glass vial. Dark liquid that looked innocent as vanilla extract. Could have been sitting on any kitchen shelf. "When the time comes," Ruth instructed, "you pour this in the last bowl of batter, the fourth layer. That way it's mixed through but not too diluted. Then you stir it counterclockwise 3 times. That's the curse direction. Then you say, 'For my grandmother in chains, for my mother sold away, for every woman used and broken, this is justice.'" Delia memorized the words, felt them burn into her memory like a brand. "And after?" she asked. "After they eat it and die?" "After," Ruth said. "You gonna hang. They gonna know it was you. Can't poison a whole family and not get caught. But you gonna die free. Free in your soul. Free knowing you fought back." Delia accepted this. Had accepted it weeks ago. Death didn't scare her. Living another year in bondage scared her more. "I'm ready," she said. Ruth pulled her close, held her tight. "Then may the ancestors walk with you. May they guide your hand. May they receive you when it's done." 2 weeks left. 14 days, 336 hours. Delia counted each one like a miser counts gold. The cake ingredients were ordered, the guests confirmed. Thomas was excited, talking about it at supper, talking about how this would be his best birthday yet. He had no idea how right he was. No idea that his 17th birthday would be his last. No idea that the quiet girl who served his food and shared his bed was about to end his family line forever. The vial of poison stayed hidden in Delia's apron pocket, close to her heart. She touched it sometimes, just to make sure it was real. Make sure this wasn't a dream. It was real. As real as the scars on her back, as real as Caleb's blood in the dirt, as real as her mother's face disappearing in that wagon. Justice was coming, slow and sweet and deadly, and it would taste like birthday cake. The final week arrived like a storm on the horizon. Inevitable, approaching, unstoppable. The big house buzzed with preparation. Constance ordered new linens from Charleston. Harlan had the silver polished till it caught light like captured stars. The guest rooms were aired out and made ready. Delia moved through it all calm as deep water. Helped Constance arrange flowers. Helped the housemaids beat rugs. Smiled when expected. Kept her eyes down when required. But inside she was counting. 5 days, 4 days, 3. Thomas sent for her twice that week. She went without complaint. Let him take what he wanted. But this time she didn't float away to that safe place in her mind. This time she stayed present, stayed watching, memorizing his face, making sure she'd remember it when he was dying. On the second night, after he was done and falling asleep satisfied, Delia looked at him in the lamplight. 17 years old, barely a man. Hadn't lived long enough to do half the evil his father had done. But give him time and he would. Give him 20 years and he'd be worse than Harlan. Would use and break twice as many lives. But she wasn't giving him 20 years. Wasn't giving him 20 days. Was giving him 2 more days of life and then the debt would be paid. "What you looking at?" Thomas mumbled, half asleep. "Nothing, master," Delia said soft. "Just thinking how handsome you getting to be." He smiled, pleased. Stupid boy. Had no idea the girl in his bed was his executioner. 2 days before the birthday, the guests started arriving. Neighbors from plantations up and down the river. Important men from Natchez. A preacher who owned 40 slaves himself and saw no contradiction in that. They came in carriages, brought their wives in silk dresses, brought their own body servants to attend them. The quarters had to house the visiting slaves in cramped conditions. 15 extra people squeezed into cabins already too full. But none of them complained. Knew better than to complain about anything. Delia recognized one of the visiting slaves, a woman named Martha from the Pemberton plantation 10 miles south. They'd met at a corn shucking 2 years back. Martha pulled Delia aside when she could. "Girl, you look different. What happened?" "Nothing," Delia lied, "just tired from all the work." But Martha knew better. She looked at Delia with knowing eyes. "I seen that look before. On runaways just before they bolt. On folks who done decided they'd rather die than keep living like this. Which one are you?" Delia was quiet a moment. Then, "Little bit of both." Martha nodded slow. "Whatever you planning, be careful. These white folks got long memories and no mercy." "I know," Delia said. "But some things got to be done anyway." They didn't speak more about it, but Martha hugged her tight before heading back to her temporary quarters. Hugged her like she knew she might not see Delia again. The day before the birthday, Essie started the cake. Delia helped, hands steady as stone. "We gonna make this one extra special," Essie said. 4 layers, each one perfect, frosting thick as cream. Young Master's last birthday before he's truly a man. Last birthday period, Delia thought, but didn't say. They worked all afternoon. Mixed the first layer, poured it in the pan, set it to bake. The second layer, the third. By evening, they had 3 layers cooling on the table. "We'll do the 4th layer tomorrow morning," Essie decided. "Fresh for the party, then we frost it all together. It's gonna be beautiful." Delia touched her apron pocket, felt the vial there. Tomorrow morning, when Essie's back was turned, when the vanilla went into the 4th layer. One more night. She walked back to the quarters under a red sunset. The sky looked like it was bleeding, looked like the world knew something terrible was coming. Tia Ruth was waiting outside her cabin. Didn't say nothing, just looked at Delia with ancient eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Tomorrow," Delia said quiet. "Tomorrow," Ruth confirmed. Then, "You scared?" "No," Delia said, and meant it. "I'm past scared. Past everything except purpose." "Good. Fear makes the hand shake. You need steady hands for what's coming." That night, Thomas sent for Delia one last time. She almost laughed when the house slave came calling her name. How fitting. His last night alive, and he wanted her in his bed. She went, climbed those stairs for the last time, entered his room, let him touch her one final time. But halfway through, she did something she'd never done before. Looked him straight in the eye, held his gaze. "What?" he asked, confused by the directness. "I just want to remember this," she said. "Remember you like this." "Why?" He was suspicious now. "Because tomorrow's your birthday. You gonna be a man. Everything gonna be different after tomorrow." He smiled, believing it was admiration. "Yeah, everything's gonna be different." "Yes, Master," Delia agreed. "Everything's gonna be different." When he fell asleep after, she didn't leave right away. Sat there in the dark, listening to him breathe, wondering if Caleb could see her from wherever dead souls go, wondering if her mother could see, if her grandmother's spirit was near. She felt them, felt their presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. "This is for you," she whispered to the darkness. "All of you who suffered, all of you they broke. This is for you." Then she rose, dressed, walked back to the quarters through the night. Tomorrow was May 17th, 1855. Thomas Harlan Whitlock's 17th birthday, his last day on Earth. And Delia was ready, had been ready for months, for years, for her whole life maybe. The vial in her pocket felt heavy as a gravestone. Heavy as justice. Heavy as the weight of every slave who'd ever dreamed of striking back. She lay on her mattress but didn't sleep. Just watched the moon move across the sky through the cracks in the cabin wall. Watched the darkness slowly give way to gray dawn. Heard the roosters crow. Heard the plantation wake up. Heard Essie calling from the big house. "Delia, come help with the cake." Delia rose, smoothed her dress, touched the vial one more time, then walked toward the kitchen with steady steps. The day had come. The kitchen was already hot when Delia arrived, though the sun had barely cleared the trees. Essie had the fire blazing, the good butter softening, the fine white flour measured out in careful portions. "There you are," Essie said, smiling. "Ready to make the finest cake this plantation ever seen?" "Yes'm," Delia answered, tying her apron on. The vial rested in the pocket, small and deadly. She could feel it there like a heartbeat. They worked in practiced rhythm. Essie creamed the butter and sugar while Delia cracked eggs into a bowl. The old woman's hands shook more than usual, palsy getting worse with age. "You gonna have to do most of the mixing," Essie admitted. "My hands ain't what they used to be, but I'll guide you, tell you exactly how." "I can do it," Delia said, and she could, had practiced in her mind 1,000 times. The first 3 layers had been made yesterday, already cooled and waiting. Now they needed the 4th, the final layer. The one that would complete the cake and complete Delia's purpose. Essie measured flour into the big ceramic bowl. "Now fold it in gentle," she instructed. "Don't stir hard, just fold." Delia folded careful and slow. The batter came together smooth as cream. "Good, good," Essie nodded. "Now the vanilla. That's what makes it special. Master Whitlock orders it special from New Orleans, real Madagascar vanilla. Cost more than most folks see in a month." She reached for the vanilla bottle on the shelf. This was the moment, the crossroads. The point of no return. "Let me get it, Miss Essie," Delia said quick. "You sit down, rest your hands." Essie hesitated, then nodded. "All right, my knee's hurtin' anyway. Just 2 tablespoons. No more, no less." Delia took the vanilla bottle with one hand. With the other, hidden in her apron pocket, she pulled out the vial. The poison looked identical to vanilla, dark brown liquid, same consistency. Her hands didn't shake, didn't tremble, stayed steady as iron. Essie had turned away, sitting down heavy on the stool, rubbing her knees. Delia poured 2 tablespoons of vanilla into the batter, then quick and certain the entire vial of poison. Stirred it counterclockwise once, twice, 3 times. Whispered under her breath, "For my grandmother in chains, for my mother sold away, for every woman used and broken. This is justice." The words fell into the batter like stones into water, disappeared but not gone. "You get it mixed in good?" Essie called. "Yes'm," Delia said, voice steady. "Mixed in perfect." She poured the batter into the 4th pan, smoothed the top, carried it to the oven. The heat hit her face like judgment, like hellfire, like the future burning bright. She slid the pan in, closed the oven door. Done. No taking it back now, no undoing what was done. Essie stood, came over to check. "Look at that, perfect. You got good hands, Delia, real good hands." "Thank you, Miss Essie," Delia said, and felt a pang of something. Not quite guilt, not quite sorrow. Essie was kind for a slave, but she served the Whitlocks, helped maintain their power, and she'd survive this. The poison was meant for the family, not the servants. While the 4th layer baked, they prepared the frosting. Butter, powdered sugar, more vanilla, a touch of cream. Whipped it till it formed stiff peaks white as snow. The cake layer came out golden and perfect. They let it cool while they assembled the others, stacked them careful, spreading frosting between each layer. The 4th layer, the poisoned one, went on top. Then they frosted the whole thing, covered it completely in white sweetness. Made it beautiful, made it look like celebration instead of execution. Essie stepped back to admire their work. "Lord have mercy, that's the finest cake I ever made. Young master gonna love it." "He surely will," Delia agreed, and thought, "He'll love it to death." They decorated with sugar roses Essie had made the day before, placed them around the edges like a funeral wreath. "Perfect," Essie declared. "Now we cover it and keep it safe till tonight. Party starts at 6. We'll serve it at 8, after supper." 8 o'clock. Delia memorized the time. At 8 o'clock tonight, the Whitlock family would eat death disguised as dessert. The day passed in preparation. The big house was cleaned until it shined. The good china was set out, the crystal glasses arranged. Fresh flowers filled every room. Guests continued arriving throughout the afternoon. Carriages lined the drive. White folks in their finest clothes gathered on the gallery, drinking and laughing. Delia served them, smiled when required, kept her face a mask. Inside, she was counting minutes. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Supper was served. Ham, turkey, sweet potatoes, green beans, fresh bread. The white folks ate and drank and talked too loud. Thomas sat at the head of the table, laughing at his father's jokes, accepting congratulations from the guests. He looked happy, looked like a boy who thought he had his whole life ahead of him. 7:30. Plates were cleared. Coffee was served. The moment was approaching. Essie and Delia brought the cake out on a silver platter, 17 candles blazing on top. The guests oohed and awed at the sight of it. "Magnificent," Harlan declared. "Absolutely magnificent." Thomas beamed, stood to blow out the candles. Everyone sang the birthday song, voices rising in celebration. He made a wish, probably wished for wealth or power or more slaves to own. Blew out the candles. Everyone clapped. Harlan picked up the knife, cut the first slice from the poisoned fourth layer, placed it on a fine china plate, handed it to his son. "For you, my boy. 17 years old today. Nearly a man." Thomas took the plate, picked up his fork. Delia watched from the corner of the dining room, watched him lift that first bite to his mouth. Time seemed to slow. She saw everything crystal clear. The candlelight reflecting off the silver, the guests' faces flushed with wine. Constance's thin smile, Harlan's proud expression. Thomas took the bite, chewed, swallowed. "Delicious," he declared. "Best cake yet." The knife cut more slices. Harlan served himself, then Constance, then the guests. Everyone eating, everyone complimenting Essie on her finest work. Delia stood perfectly still, watched them eat poison and smile, watched justice being consumed one sweet bite at a time, and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no regret. Just a vast emptiness where feeling used to be. It was done. The seed was planted. Now came the harvest. The party continued for 2 more hours. Fiddle music played on the gallery. Men smoked cigars and drank bourbon. Women fanned themselves in the warm evening air, talking about nothing important. Delia served coffee and cleaned dishes, moved through the crowd like a ghost. Nobody paid her no mind. Slaves was furniture to these folks, present but invisible. Thomas ate 3 slices of cake total. Harlan ate 2. Constance picked at 1 slice delicate-like, but finished it. The guests all ate. Some had seconds. By 10 o'clock, folks started leaving. Carriages pulled away into the darkness. Guests thanked the Whitlocks for a lovely evening. Thomas received pats on the back and handshakes. "Fine young man you've raised," one plantation owner said to Harlan. "He's got a bright future ahead." "Indeed he does," Harlan agreed, pride thick in his voice. Delia heard this and thought, "No, he don't." By 11, the last guests had departed. Only the Whitlock family remained, along with a few close friends staying overnight in the guest rooms. The family retired to the parlor. Delia brought them nightcaps, whiskey for Harlan, wine for Constance, sweet tea for Thomas, who was already looking flushed and tired. "Wonderful party," Constance said, sipping her wine. "Everything was perfect. Best birthday yet," Thomas agreed, loosening his collar. "I feel like a king tonight." They sat there talking, laughing, planning Thomas's future. Harlan spoke of sending him to university next year. Constance talked about finding him a suitable wife from a good family. Thomas just smiled, drunk on cake and attention and his own importance. Delia was dismissed around midnight. She walked back to the quarters under a sky so full of stars it looked like the ancestors was watching, waiting. Tia Ruth was awake, sitting outside her cabin. "It's done?" she asked, quiet. "It's done," Delia confirmed. "How long till it takes effect?" 6 hours, maybe 8. Depends on the person. Bigger folks take longer. Ruth nodded. "So come morning." "Come morning," Delia repeated. She lay on her mattress but didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Just waited. Listened to the night sounds. Crickets, tree frogs, an owl calling somewhere distant. Around 3 in the morning, she heard the first scream. It came from the big house. A woman's voice. Constance, probably. Then shouting, boots running, chaos blooming in the darkness. Delia sat up. So did half the quarters. People emerged from cabins, looking toward the big house where lights blazed in every window now. "What's happening?" someone whispered. Delia said nothing, just watched. More screaming, a man's voice calling for help. Then a house slave came running to the quarters, wild-eyed and terrified. "Get the doctor," he shouted. "Get him now, the master's sick. The whole family's sick." Someone ran for the doctor's house 2 miles away. The rest of the quarters gathered in small groups, whispering, speculating. Delia stood apart, waited. Dawn came slow and red. The doctor arrived looking exhausted. He'd been roused from sleep. Went into the big house. Stayed there an hour. Came out looking pale and shaken. "What's wrong with them?" the overseer asked. "I don't know," the doctor admitted. "Some kind of stomach ailment. They're all vomiting, weak, hearts racing. The boy's the worst. He's hardly conscious." Delia felt something stir in her chest. Not quite satisfaction, more like acknowledgement. Like watching a storm you predicted finally arrive. The day dragged on. House slaves went in and out carrying chamber pots and bloody linens. The doctor stayed, trying everything he knew. Nothing helped. By noon, Thomas was unconscious. Harlan was delirious with fever. Constance was the most lucid, but barely. She kept calling for the preacher, convinced they was under some curse. Maybe they was. Depends on how you look at it. The 2 overnight guests got sick too. Not as bad, since they'd eaten less cake. But sick enough to know something was terrible wrong. It must have been the food, the doctor theorized. Something spoiled. Bad meat, perhaps. Nobody mentioned the cake. Nobody thought to suspect the cake. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Thomas died. Just stopped breathing. The doctor was holding his wrist, checking his pulse, when it went still. "He's gone," the doctor said, voice hollow. Constance's wail could be heard clear across the plantation. A mother's grief, raw and terrible. Harlan heard the news and tried to get up. Tried to go to his son, but couldn't. Collapsed back on the bed, weeping. An hour later, one of the overnight guests died, then the other. By sunset, Harlan was barely clinging to life. Constance was unconscious. The big house had become a tomb. The quarters was silent. Everyone knew something unnatural had happened. Everyone knew this wasn't just bad food. Tia Ruth found Delia behind the smokehouse as night fell. "They're dying," Ruth said. Statement, not question. "Yes," Delia confirmed. "You feel anything about it?" Delia considered. "I feel like I should feel something, but I don't. Just empty, like watching rain fall." "That's the price," Ruth said. "The price of justice, it empties you out." They stood together in the gathering darkness. From the big house came another scream. Then silence, deep and final. "Master Harlan just passed," a house slave reported, running by. "Doctor says the mistress won't last the night." Delia nodded. 3 dead already, 1 more dying. The Whitlock line, strong for 3 generations, ending in less than 24 hours. All from a birthday cake. All from one woman's patience and rage and absolute refusal to accept her suffering as God's will. The night deepened. Stars emerged. And in the big house, Constance Whitlock took her last breath around midnight. The doctor emerged, looking haunted. "They're all dead," he said to the overseer. "The whole family, gone." "How?" the overseer demanded. "How does a whole family die in one day?" The doctor shook his head. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if their hearts just gave up." Delia stood in the shadows, listening. Hearts gave up. That was one way to say it. Another way, justice finally came. Morning came with confusion, thick as Mississippi fog. 4 bodies lay in the big house. The Whitlock family, masters of 3,000 acres, owners of 147 souls, all dead within 24 hours of the birthday celebration. The neighboring planters arrived by noon, men in dark suits, grave-faced and nervous. If it could happen to the Whitlocks, could it happen to them? Was it disease, plague, divine judgment? They examined the bodies, questioned the doctor, inspected the house top to bottom. That's when someone thought to question the food. "What did they eat at the party?" asked Jeremiah Caldwell, owner of the adjacent plantation. The house slaves listed everything: ham, turkey, sweet potatoes, beans, bread, and the cake. "The cake," Caldwell repeated. "Who made the cake?" "Essie did," the cook herself answered, trembling. "Like always. Same recipe I've been using for 20 years. "And who helped you?" Essie's eyes went wide. She looked at Delia standing in the corner. "Delia helped, but she just did what I told her, just followed the recipe." All eyes turned to Delia. She stood perfectly still, face blank as a closed door. Caldwell approached her. "You helped make the cake?" "Yes, sir," Delia answered, quiet. "And did you put anything unusual in it? Anything different?" "No, sir, just flour, sugar, butter, eggs, vanilla, same as always." But Caldwell was nobody's fool. He'd owned slaves for 30 years, knew how to read guilt on a face, fear in the eyes. And what he saw in Delia wasn't fear. It was something else, something calm and settled and completely unrepentant. "Search her cabin," he ordered the overseer. "Search it thoroughly. Look for anything suspicious. Herbs, powders, potions." They dragged Delia to the quarters, ransacked her cabin, threw her meager possessions on the ground, tore up the floorboards, found nothing. Delia had burned Tia Ruth's papers days ago, had washed the vial clean and thrown it in the river, left no evidence except what was already inside the bodies. But Caldwell wasn't done. Searched the old conjure woman's cabin too, the one they call Ruth. These things usually involve the root workers. They searched Ruth's cabin, found her medicine bag, her herbs, her roots, found things that could heal and things that could kill. "Bring her here," Caldwell ordered. They brought Tia Ruth out. She walked with her head high, chin up, no fear showing. Caldwell held up a dried root. "What's this?" "Medicine," Ruth said, "and for stomach aches." "And this?" He held up another. "For fever." "And this one?" "Pokeweed root. The poison." Ruth didn't blink. "For dropsy, small amounts ease fluid from the body. Or large amounts kill," Caldwell said. Ruth shrugged. "Large amounts of anything kill, sir. Even water." Caldwell's face reddened. "Don't play games with me, old woman. Did you give poison to Delia? Did you help her murder the Whitlock family?" "I gave her nothing but kindness," Ruth said. "Same as I give everyone in these quarters." They questioned her for an hour. Got nothing. Ruth was too old, too wise, too practiced at hiding truth behind careful words. Finally, Caldwell turned back to Delia. "Last chance. Confess now and your death will be quick. Stay silent and it'll be slow." Delia looked at him with eyes that had seen too much to be frightened by threats. "I got nothing to confess," she said. "I made a cake. The family ate it. They died. Maybe it was God's will, maybe their time just came." "God's will," Caldwell repeated, voice dripping sarcasm. "You expect us to believe that?" "I don't expect nothing," Delia said. "Learned a long time ago not to expect nothing from white folks but cruelty." The slap came hard and fast. Knocked her to the ground. Blood filled her mouth. "Confess!" Caldwell shouted. Delia spit blood in the dirt, looked up at him. "What, you want me to confess? That I killed them? All right. I killed them. Put poison in that cake and watched them eat it with smiles on their faces. Watched them die slow and painful. And I'd do it again." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds stopped singing. "Why?" Caldwell finally asked, voice quieter now, almost curious. Delia stood up slow. "Because Thomas Whitlock used me like I was an animal. Because Master Harlan whipped me for refusing to carry a rapist's child. Because Mrs. Constance watched it happen and did nothing. Because this whole plantation is built on suffering and somebody had to make them pay." She looked around at all the white faces staring at her. You want to know if I poisoned them? Yes, I did. I poisoned them with the same roots that grow in the swamp where y'all dump the bodies of slaves you work to death. I poisoned them with rage that's been brewing since my grandmother crossed the Middle Passage. I poisoned them with every tear my mama cried when she was sold away from me. Delia smiled then, small and terrible, and the only thing I regret is that I can only kill them once. The men were stunned into silence. They'd expected denial, expected groveling, expected fear. What they got was defiance pure as spring water. Caldwell recovered first. Chain her. Tomorrow morning we hang her in the town square. Make it public. Make it an example. Show every slave in Mississippi what happens when they forget their place. They chained Delia's hands and feet, threw her in the plantation jail, a small brick building with one window and a dirt floor. That night, they let Tia Ruth visit her. One last time. Ruth came with water and a rag to clean Delia's face, sat beside her in the darkness. You did it, Ruth said softly. You actually did it. I did, Delia confirmed. How you feel? Free, Delia said. And it was true. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Not her body. That was chained. But her soul. Her soul was light as air. They gonna hang you tomorrow, Ruth said. I know. You scared? No, Delia said. Death don't scare me. Living as a slave another day scared me more. Ruth held her hand. The story's gonna live, I'll make sure of it. Gonna tell it to the children, they'll tell their children, and their children's children. Long after you gone, folks gonna remember Delia. Gonna remember that sometimes the powerless find power. Sometimes the beaten strike back. Good, Delia said. Let them remember. Let them know we ain't always victims. Sometimes we survivors, sometimes we warriors. They sat together till the guards came to take Ruth away. Delia lay on the dirt floor and looked at the stars through the small window. Tomorrow she'd die, but tonight she was free. And the Whitlocks? They were dead and buried, their line ended, their legacy poisoned. Justice might be slow, but it was real, and it tasted sweet. Dawn broke gray and cold, the kind of morning that feels like the world holding its breath. Delia woke on the dirt floor, chains heavy on her wrists and ankles, and felt nothing but calm. Today was her last day. She knew it, accepted it, welcomed it even. They came for her at 8 o'clock. 4 white men with rifles, unlocked the cell, dragged her out into the light. A wagon waited in the yard. They threw her in the back like a sack of grain. The whole plantation had been ordered to gather. Every slave, every overseer, every house servant, all forced to witness. Delia saw their faces as the wagon pulled away, saw fear, saw sorrow, saw something else too, something the white folks didn't notice. Pride, hidden deep but there. Pride that one of their own had struck back. Tia Ruth stood at the front of the crowd. When Delia's eyes met hers, the old woman nodded once, slow and deliberate. A blessing, a farewell. A promise that the story would live. The wagon rolled through the plantation gates, headed toward town. The journey took an hour. Delia sat in the back, hands chained, looking at the land she'd never see again. Mississippi in May was beautiful, she had to admit. Green fields, blue sky, birds singing, birds. The world kept turning even when individual lives ended. They reached the town square around 9. A crowd had already gathered. Hundreds of white folks come to see the hanging. Come to see justice done, as they called it. The gallows stood in the center of the square. New wood, hastily built. A platform with 13 steps leading up. A beam with a rope hanging from it. They pulled Delia from the wagon, marched her through the crowd. People jeered, threw things, called her murderer and devil and worse. Delia kept her head up, didn't flinch, didn't cower. At the base of the gallows, the sheriff read the charges. Delia, slave of the late Harlan Whitlock, you have been found guilty of murder, of poisoning your master, his wife, his son, and 2 guests. The sentence is death by hanging. Do you have any last words? Delia looked out at the crowd, saw hundreds of white faces waiting for her to beg, waiting for tears, waiting for her to say she was sorry. She smiled instead. Small at first, then wider. "Last words," she said, voice carrying clear across the square. "Yes, I got words." She turned to look at the few black faces scattered in the crowd. Slaves who'd been brought to witness, to learn the lesson of obedience. "To my people," she said loud, "remember this. Remember that chains bind the body but not the soul. Remember that patience is a weapon. Remember that the smallest hand can bring down the mightiest house if the will is strong enough." "Enough," the sheriff barked. But Delia wasn't done. "They used me like an animal, beat me, violated me, tried to break me, but I didn't break. I bent, I waited, I planned, and when the time came, I struck." She looked at the white faces now and her smile turned cold. "Y'all think you safe in your big houses? Think your power makes you untouchable? Look at the Whitlocks. Look at what one slave girl did to a whole family. And ask yourself, which one of your slaves is next? Which one is watching, waiting, learning?" The crowd erupted in angry shouts. The sheriff grabbed her arm. "Get her up there." They dragged her up the 13 steps. Each one felt symbolic somehow. 13 steps to freedom. 13 steps to the ancestors. At the top, the hangman waited. He put the noose around her neck. The rope was rough against her skin. "Any final words?" he asked, quieter now that they was away from the crowd. "Tell them I died smiling," Delia said. The hangman hesitated. "You ain't supposed to smile, you supposed to be scared." "Well," Delia said, "I reckon I'm doing it wrong then." Below, the sheriff gave the signal. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Delia looked out one last time, saw the sky, saw the sun breaking through clouds, saw a bird flying overhead free as anything. She thought of her grandmother crossing the ocean, her mother being sold away, all the women who'd suffered before her and all who'd suffer after. She thought of Caleb dying under the whip, of Tia Ruth's wisdom, of the poison mixing in that cake batter. And she smiled, really smiled, because in this moment, despite the rope around her neck, despite everything, she was free, had been free from the moment she decided to fight back. The hangman pulled the lever. The floor dropped. For a moment, Delia was flying. Just falling and flying and free. Then the rope caught, tightened, and the world went dark. But not before one last thought crossed her mind. I won. Down in the crowd, Tia Ruth watched Delia's body swing from the gallows, watched the white folks disperse, satisfied that justice had been served, watched the slaves being herded back to their plantations. But Ruth knew better. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The story of Delia, the woman who poisoned the Whitlocks, would spread, would be whispered in quarters across the South, would be told and retold until it became legend. And every time a slave heard it, they'd think, if she could do it, maybe I can too. That was the real poison Delia had unleashed. Not the pokeweed in the cake, but the idea that resistance was possible, that revenge was achievable, that the powerless could become powerful if they were patient and clever and willing to pay the price. Ruth smiled to herself, small and secret, then walked back to the plantation to begin telling the story of Delia, the birthday gift who became a death sentence, the quiet girl who brought down a dynasty with nothing but rage and roots and a birthday cake, the story that would never die, even if Delia had. Years passed. The Whitlock plantation was sold off piece by piece. The big house fell into ruin, windows broken, paint peeling, weeds growing through the floorboards. Folks said it was haunted, said you could hear screaming on quiet nights, said the ghosts of the family still walked those halls, looking for the justice they thought they deserved but never got. The quarters was torn down eventually. Nothing left but patches of darker earth where cabins used to stand, where families slept, where children was born, where Delia had planned her revenge. But the story didn't die. Couldn't die. Tia Ruth told it first like she'd promised, told it to the children in hushed voices after dark. They listened with wide eyes, hearts pounding, learning that resistance was possible, that the powerless could strike back. When Ruth died in 1867, 12 years after Delia's hanging, she passed the story to her granddaughter. Who told her children? Who told theirs? The story traveled, crossed state lines, moved north with the Great Migration, got whispered in Chicago tenements and Detroit factories, got sung in coded spirituals, got written down in journals that historians would find 100 years later and argue over. Some details changed over time, like all oral histories do. Some folks said Delia poisoned 50 white people. Some said she escaped and was never caught. Some said her ghost still haunts plantations across Mississippi, protecting enslaved souls. But the core stayed the same. A woman, used and broken, who refused to stay broken, who turned her rage into purpose, who brought down her oppressors with patience and poison and perfect timing. In 1920, Delia's great-great-niece, a woman named Sarah who'd never been enslaved, who'd grown up free in the North, heard the story from her grandmother. She was 15 years old, sitting on a porch in Philadelphia, listening to the old woman speak. "Your ancestor was Delia," her grandmother said, "the one who poisoned the Whitlocks, the one who smiled on the gallows. You got her blood, you got her strength." Sarah asked, "Was she a hero or a murderer?" Her grandmother smiled. "She was both. She was neither. She was a woman who'd suffered too much and decided to make them pay. History gonna judge her different ways, but we remember her. That's what matters." Now here in this year of 2026, the story still lives. Gets told in different ways, in books, in movies, in whispered family histories. Gets debated by scholars who never felt the weight of chains. Gets celebrated by descendants who understand that survival sometimes requires violence. The Whitlock name is forgotten now. Nobody remembers Harlan or Thomas or Constance except as footnotes in Delia's story. The oppressors became supporting characters in the narrative of the oppressed. But Delia is remembered. Her name carries power. Her story carries weight. Every time it's told, she lives again. Every time someone hears it and thinks maybe I can resist too, she wins again. That's the thing about stories like this. They don't end when the person dies. They end when people stop telling them. And as long as there's injustice in the world, as long as there's people suffering under the weight of power, folks gonna keep telling Delia's story. Gonna keep remembering that the smallest hand can bring down the biggest house. That patience is a weapon. That rage, when focused and refined and applied at the perfect moment, can change everything. So I tell you now, children, remember Delia. Remember that she was real. Remember that her suffering was real. Remember that her revenge was real. Remember that sometimes the only justice available is the justice we take for ourselves. And remember this most of all: the powerful want you to forget. Want you to believe resistance is futile. Want you to accept your chains as God's will. But Delia didn't forget, didn't accept, didn't bow. And because she didn't, her story survived. Her spirit survived. Her legacy survived. Who suffered, suffered. Who resisted, left memory. And memory we keep here in the echoes from the quarters.